the world has changed. AI has changed everything, and it's wild. In the United States, we spend a good fraction of our healthcare dollars, way over 60% in the last 2 years of life. I want to get back to dying of old age and to do it with dignity.
Here you're telling us that our chances of Alzheimer's drop by 50%?
It's pretty dramatic.
So your recommendation is, I can't wait to introduce you to our next guest. His name is Dr. David Agus. He's arguably the best doctor in the world. He's been the doctor to Steve Jobs and the Pope and Bill Clinton. He's actually been my doctor as well. But he more importantly runs an institute, the Ellison Medical Institute, which is this vast pool of expertise in AI. And this podcast, you're probably going to want to get the transcript and be ready with the highlighter because it's full of such great knowledge. Everything from how to pick the right doctor to should you be starting your day with a smoothie to the newest AI innovations that are coming, by the way, in the next 3 years that could actually lengthen your life expectancy by 10 years. So tune in, join us, and grab your highlighter. You know, you are the doctor to all these legendary people, Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison and Bill Clinton and the Pope and, you know, most illustriously me lately. And first of all, how did that happen? But I guess more to, I think, the point of this podcast, because we try to convey what we know to others. Mm-hmm. So instead of having to, you know, hire you as their doctor, they can just listen to this podcast. But what should we be looking for in a doctor if we want to live a long time?
You know, to me, health is a team, and you need a team on it. There's no one right way. Everybody always thinks, well, should I be doing this or that? It really depends on your value system. So you need a doctor who can have a discussion with you and make the decisions together with you based on your value system. And that's what's critical, right? It's not a doctor to be a parent, to say, hey, do this, and then I'll see you in 3 months. It's to have a relationship with. And so I'm privileged that, you know, in my life, I've been able to have some amazing people, some of whom are well-known, many of whom are not, where I can have a relationship with and help their health care. You know, I pinch myself every day that people put their health in my hands. And I say, oh my gosh, this is amazing that they trust me for this. But we've been doing it for a long time. And like it or not, my business is pattern recognition.
Interesting.
Right? And so it's seeing all these things and saying, hey, you know, this pattern I recognize, here is going to be the outcome or here's going to be the outcome. I can look on a paper and the statistics say, hey, the outcome will be X. But my gut, and I don't always know why, but my gut is right most of the time. Say, even though the paper says this, I actually think it's going to be this. So everybody who comes with me with cancer, I look under the microscope at their cancer and I get a gut. Hey, this is going to be more aggressive than it says. And I do something that almost no docs do today, which is, and I know it sounds morbid, you're going to give me weird looks, but I do autopsies on my patients when they pass away.
Oh, wow.
Because I want to know, and I want a feedback loop. I thought that was scar tissue in the lung. That was cancer. Or that was an infection. They had some chest pain. Well, it wasn't a heart attack. It was bad reflux. And they had an ulcer. So it enables me to get better and to learn. And while it may sound morbid, every single patient says, yes, I'd like you to because I want you to get better for the next person.
Yes, because you could have been wrong.
And I am wrong many times, and I learned from it.
Yes, and you get slightly righter each time. Well, I mean, I was so flattered. I was in Spain and I got sick, and you were the Pope's doctor, and then we talked on the phone, and you were instantly interested, and you asked great questions, and I could tell you cared, and you called me back, and I go, geez, the Pope's doctor is calling me back, and I suspect that no matter who you are, you'll get that same sort of inquiry and follow-up from you.
Well, I mean, I think what you were trying to say politely is that you were instantly a pain in the ass.
Yes.
And so, listen, I want
usually
everything.
Usually gets the response I need.
I want everything perfect. And I literally am a perfectionist on these things. And I can be a pain in the ass. Because many times, you know, people say, I don't want to take a medicine. It's a sign of weakness. I don't want to do that. Or, you know, I've got something scheduled tomorrow, so forget the test. I'll do it next week. And I've seen the bad outcomes. And so I push where I really believe to make the better outcomes.
You know, I'm working on a book now on the places around the world with the longest health spans, not blue zones, but places where people live the longest healthiest lives. And there's a place in Norway, and one of the insights we brought back was that they don't spend a lot of money on specialists. In fact, it's very hard to get a specialist. Here we got specialists for everything. There, the focus is on the general practitioner, kind of the country doctor. And I looked at some research and found that one of the most important decisions, health decisions you can make is picking a doctor who shares your values, who you can have for the long run. You're the same doctor for 30 years. Why would that be?
Well, I think, listen, there are two parts. One is you want a doctor that can look at the whole, not just the part. So when you go to a specialist, they're looking at your heart, your GI tract, your brain, your lung. I want someone who can look at the whole, right? Because we're not reductionist creatures. We're a complex emergent system. So every time you treat one thing, it's going to affect everything else. So you want someone who's going to look at that big picture. Then the second is that, you look at yourself every day in the mirror. You get to know yourself. Your doctor has a transaction with you, and it really is a transaction once a year at most. And so in order for them to really get a sense of you, there needs to be that longitudinal follow-up, to understand your value systems, how you talk about things. I have patients that are stoic and never complain. I have patients that complain all the time. And for me to understand what's serious, it really takes that relationship. And then I think the most important is you'll only trust me if you have a relationship with me. If I say to do something, I'm better than most. I don't really need to do it. But if there's a level of trust there, then you'll do it. And compliance with that trust is how you get the best outcome.
So get a doctor you can have for the long run and develop trust.
Yeah, stay away from old doctors is what I'm trying to say.
So you not only learn from patients and autopsies, but you've learned recently from animals. And you have this new book, The Book of Animal Secrets. What do we learn from animals when it comes to longevity?
It's so freaking cool, right? I went on this trip with my family to Africa. And it's wild because you see the way the world was, right? Where animals just roaming free. And we've all been on this earth a million years, humans and animals. And what can we learn from their system to basically, for us to adopt or to basically cheat on to learn for our own health? And it's very interesting. So I went to the world's experts on different creatures and I say, hey, you're the world's ant expert. What can I learn from you? What's wild is that queen ant, for example, she will live about 40 years. Whereas the worker ant, same genetics, she gives birth to all of them, they'll live 6 months. So what's the difference in the lifestyle between the queen ant and the worker ant? Well, it turns out the worker ants are all taking risk, right? They go out of the hive. They go out of the ant colony and they go and they search for food. They make sure they're safe. They get exposed to infectious disease. What's interesting.
And anteaters.
Yes, and anteaters, true. If they get sick, they basically will stay outside the colony for 2 or 3 days. If they get better, they come back. If they don't, they die. And they've learned that the colony is more important than the individual. And it's an amazing lesson.
What a great piece of insight.
If they get injured, right, the world's ant expert, I said, what's the wildest lesson you learned? He goes, it was actually horrible. I was driving to my ant colony. I'd been studied in Africa, and I was away from my family, and I felt so guilty. And on the way to the ant colony, I got a call from my son, and he broke his leg playing soccer. And I was just aghast, and I ran over my colony. I go, what? He goes, I've been studying it for years, and I ran over the colony. He goes, but I made my greatest discovery, that when an ant is injured, if there are 2 or more legs injured, they let them die in the battlefield. But if it's fewer, then they lick the wound, they bring them back, and they have about a 93% survival.
Wow.
In the saliva is some anti-infectives, and they have a triage system where they put the resources to the ones who will get better. And it was a staggering lesson if you think about it.
Yeah, I suppose there's some lessons in our healthcare system and who you can save and who you probably can't and what.
Well, listen, the United States, we spend a good fraction of our healthcare dollars, way over 60% in the last 2 years of life. And we spend almost none in those first, 3 or 4 or 5 decades, right? We need to focus our shift to prevention rather than just treating. In the United States, there's kind of a magic age of 83, where if you reach that age, in most hospitals, they don't put you on a ventilator. They don't do these crazy heroic things. They let you die where the last time you could do this in the United States legally was in the 1960s with a cause of death on a death certificate being old age. They always want a cause, right?
Yeah.
They died of lung cancer, of heart disease, whatever. I want to get back to dying of old age and to do it with dignity.
Well, we like to think that we can live to 120, but the ceiling right now, the capacity of the human machine, if you do everything right, is probably mid-90s. Unless you're going to tell us something today we don't already know, but getting past 100 right now, you have to have won the genetic lottery. So,
I totally agree, but I think the world has changed. And 6 months ago, we had this interview. I would say you're right. Kind of the max of our engineering is kind of the mid to late 90s. But AI has changed everything. I made a drug for breast cancer that's now on the market. It took 10 years to make and to show it worked in cells, then 7 years to test in humans. In the last 6 months, I've been able to make 4 drugs.
wow.
And so it's wild, right? I could say, hey, here's a molecule I want to bind to. I want it to bind right here, and I could design something that does. Then I say, here's every other protein in the human body. I don't want it to bind to those. Here's the immune system, how it works and how it recognizes things. I don't want this to be recognized as foreign. And here's the metabolism genes that I want it to last X long in the blood. And it can do that. I could build in these constraints and I can make drugs, which means all the dreams of if I could turn this off or on, I want to do it to help us have longer health span. I can now do that. And it's wild. Absolutely wild.
So you're saying the pace of discovery is faster.
The pace of discovery, and then also the insight, right? A group of young people, and it's horrible because they're all 20-year-olds, and it's just inappropriate that AI is dominated by this generation of kids, 20 to 30 years old. But what they did was they took this bag of words, which is electronic health records, right? That's what they are. I would type in words, and they converted it to structured data with large language models. And they started to look. And one of the things that popped out, for example, was like the shingles vaccine reduced Alzheimer's by close to 50%.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, for decades and hundreds of billions of dollars, we were wrong, right? Well, these plaques, they lead to Alzheimer's. They do, but we didn't realize that plaques could have been an immune response to a virus that affects neurons, like shingles does, and it yielded the plaque. So you hit that virus before it affects those neurons, what do you know? You could prevent shingles. And there probably will be several other viruses associated. Right now, we know 100% of multiple sclerosis is from a virus.
I just want to stop there on one thing because a lot of people out there don't believe in vaccinations. And I know
it became a religion. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, and they think about all these sort of bizarre kind of side effects of it. But here you're telling us that if we get the shingles vaccination, which is often recommended to older people, 2 shots, and I've done them.
I love this. Older people over 50. That ain't older. Come on.
I meant older than us even.
Yes.
But not only might we not endure symptoms as bad as we would if we got shingles again, which often happens in older age, but our chances of Alzheimer's drop by 50%.
It's pretty dramatic, right?
Wow.
This is a vaccine that's already on the market, that's FDA approved for everybody over the age of 50, yet probably less than 10% of people in the country who are eligible actually get it. Shingles hits a good portion of the U.S. population in some time. We all have, it's chickenpox come back. We all have chickenpox inside our neurons. And when you get stress, cortisol goes up, your immune system goes down because it's saving energy for flight, to flee a lion. And then what can happen is that virus can come back and you can get shingles. Well, you block that pretty easily with this vaccine. And at the same time, a dramatic effect on Alzheimer's.
So your recommendation is get the shingles vaccine.
My recommendation before this was get the shingles vaccine. Now with this new data, get that shingles vaccine. Yes.
Talk a little bit more about animals. Any other insights from your book of animal secrets that really stood out?
There are lots. The elephant. When I first saw the elephant, the guide, whoever these very wise people who've been in Africa for years, I looked at him and goes, listen, they're so big with so many cells, they must get lots of cancer. He looked at me and goes, elephants never get cancer. I go, how could that be? They're so large. Every time a cell divides, there's a chance for error, and that error can lead to cancer. He goes, but no. And so it turns out a remarkable group of researchers looked at elephants and a gene called P53 that corrects error in the genome, mainly from inflammation. You and I have one copy of that gene. Every elephant on every continent has 20 copies of that gene. So all of a sudden, here's a way that if we can recapitulate, we can prevent cancer. You say, why? Well, elephant females give birth into their late 60s. The dominant male protects the herd until the day he dies. So they couldn't afford to get cancer. By the time we hit our 30s, we've had our children, which is what evolution is protecting for. So there really was no reason to protect us. In fact, if we got knocked off with cancer or heart disease, it left more food and housing for the next generation. So all of a sudden, again, here's some insight, block inflammation that can lead to this DNA damage. We're not going to amplify P53 just yet without new drugs that don't exist, but we can block that inflammation, which is the root of much of cancer, much of heart disease, and much of Alzheimer's. And there are lots of simple ways to do that in our lifestyle.
I've been writing about happiness for National Geographic for the past 15 years. Wrote a cover story, wrote a book called The Blue Zones of Happiness. And I found that most of what really delivers happiness is all about our environment. Perhaps the most important decision you make is where you choose to live and the home or homes that you live in. And the other important strategy for happiness is to have enough money so you feel financially secure. You don't necessarily need a lot of money to buy lots of things, but to be able to sleep well at night. And my strategy for doing both was to buy a second home for my family, a place where I can bike and I can row my boat and downshift, but knowing that I can also afford it by hosting it on Airbnb. And it was amazing what I discovered. So your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host. Upgrade your environment, and we'll see you when you're 100. So I hold 3 world records for biking across 5 continents, but I can honestly tell you my single best week of cycling was with Divine Cycling Adventure Company. We took a glorious trip across Sardinia. They had 3 guides that kept the bikes going. They were great tour guides. They were great chefs. They knew the history of the place. One guy was an expert on wine. By the way, nobody was ever for want of wine, and they knew the best terroir. They knew where to get the best food. We woke up in the morning. We had pimpin' bicycles that were ready to go, a fantastic breakfast. We went on somewhere between 50 and 70 miles a day of exquisite riding. They curated the course. They found a great place for lunch, and we always ended with a great dinner. It was just the best mix of physical activity, actually experiencing a place, not just traveling to it, but experiencing a place, and then emerging from the experience with new friends, new knowledge, and better conditioning. So it's called Divine Cycling and Adventure Company. It's $150 off per person when you book your first Divine tour. That's DUVINE.com/live better longer. And we'll see you when you're 100. There's so many questions here. But the question I'm going to go with is this. So you were talking about AI being able to produce drugs that could perhaps cure or prevent breast cancer. And there's sort of one branch of longevity in avoiding the diseases that foreshorten our lives. Mm-hmm. Cardiovascular disease, number 1. Mm-hmm. Type 2 diabetes, cancer, dementia. But then there's this sort of fundamental mechanisms of aging that you pointed out, like every 7 years or so, our cells reproduce themselves and there's a doubling of damage. And, by the time you're in your 70s or 80s, you're not only old or older, but you're getting older exponentially faster because you have so much built up damage doubling every 7 years. Is there anything that shows promise at addressing that fundamental doubling of damage as we get older.
So there was a remarkable scientist who in the 1950s published her only paper, and then she left science. Her name was Wanda Ruth Lunsford. And what she did was she took an old rat and a young rat, and she put them to sleep, and she tied their skin together so their blood supplies join. So after about a week or two, what you started to see in the old rat is the gray hairs turned brown again. The heart beat stronger. There were new neurons growing in the brain. She claimed she reversed aging, and they kicked her out of science. Well, it turns out
Frankensteinian.
It is, but Wanda's experiment was repeated at Harvard, at UCSF, and Stanford several years ago, and it worked. And what people were able to show is that at age 25, our stem cells go to sleep. They're still in our body, but they're sound asleep. So there now are ways of potentially turning them back on. So there's a cream, for example, which you could rub on the scalp, and your hair grows back its original color. So if I do it on my cheek, no hair grows because there are no hair stem cells here. They're over here. And there's trials in the...
Does your hair grow back too?
Grows back the original color.
How come that isn't,
it's in clinical trials right now.
Oh my God.
They're trying to activate these stem cells in the elderly that broke their hip and people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And so it's difficult, these proteins, but as with AI now, we could start to make ways of stimulating them and turning them on in various locations, not everywhere, but in where they're needed. So I do think we're going to be at a point that we can actually reverse many of the maladies of aging, and what you're calling health span, we can enable that, right? You don't want to live until 115 unless it's quality years.
That's right.
And so I really think, and this is, I think if we can, all of us, stay healthy the next 2 to 3 years, we could probably add on 10 to 15 years on our life for what's happening now with AI.
Just 2 to 3 years, stay healthy, get on the Blue Zones diet.
No, exactly. I mean, it really is
you'll
amazing.
Be here when the innovation gets here that can give us the next big leap.
Well, think about it. What the Blue Zones is you had this pattern recognition by going out and saying, hey, this part of the world, somebody does better than here. Why is that? And why is the group of people? And you notice these patterns that were different. The beauty of what AI is right, it takes the human brain and it could see patterns much better than we can. And it could look at vastly more data to see those patterns. So if you were able to find the blue zones, with your brain, you can imagine your brain times 1,000, which is what these GPU clusters are.
Sounds like a dumpster fire. Times 1,000. You're probably more at the center of these innovations than anybody else. And it's the Ellison Medical Institute. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that is sort of your main hub of insight and innovation?
Yeah, so I run the Ellison Medical Institute, which is a standalone institute. It's affiliated with University of Southern California, and we also have an affiliation with our sister organization at University of Oxford, where we have researchers who can apply technology to health, and we can push aggressively to try to make sure we can all benefit from this today.
I was scrolling through all of a lot of these institutes you hear about. It's a grand name, and there's like 3 people behind it. And I was scrolling pages and pages of who are all these people who are in this institute.
It's amazing people. It started because I had breakfast with Larry Ellison once, and he said, what's your dream? I said, my dream is to have a place where engineers, mathematicians, physicists can all work together with cancer doctors, biologists, and people looking at longevity in every different field and put their insights together because we all think differently. A mathematician approaches a problem different than a physicist, very different than a biologist, very different than a doctor. Put them all together to try to make insight on disease. And he said, how much will it cost to build this? I said, I made up a number. He goes, let's do it. And we did it. And we have this institute now. And we have remarkable people from all different disciplines working together to try to make a difference in health. Many of them are full-time where they've left what they did. Murray Gell-Mann, who we talked about briefly before, one of the greatest living physicists, discovered the quark in string theory, won the Nobel Prize in 1969 when I was 4. He started to work in the last 7 years of his life with us on cancer. He used to look at me and said, listen, the problem with your field, I go, what do you mean my field? He goes, with doctors, is you always look at the average. You have to look at the outliers.
Oh, interesting.
Right? When you look at the outliers, that's how in physics we learned all of our rules, right? We think all of the electrons should be here, but there's one over here. Why did that get over here?
Yeah,
When you look at the outliers. Then he said, listen, you're really fans of data. I go, yeah, data is everything. He goes, the problem with data is that most of the time it's too much, especially for the human brain. What you need to do is coarse grain things. When you were sick, your mother didn't draw your blood and look at your T cells and measure your cytokines. She went like this, right? This is a coarse grained measurement of biology.
Yeah. And
So coarse
for
grain
those
comes
of you who
from,
can't see, David, he's putting his hand on his forehead to test fever.
because it comes from the, photography, coarse graining, right? You make the lens of a camera blurry and I see the outline, you're a human. If I measured every pore on your face, every hair, every aspect of you, it would take a long time to figure out what it represents.
Yeah.
The climate models look at the shape of the cloud and it tells them the weather. They don't go up and measure 600 variables. That shape of the cloud tells them everything. It's a coarse-grained element. So we need to start to coarse-grain things in biology and then do our modeling like the physics do. And it kind of changed my view of looking at health and disease. He was amazing.
So you have all of these experts, physicists and mathematicians and physicians. How do you organize them so it's not completely chaos? How do you create collaboration rather than silos?
We do it one simple way, is that we have the clinic in the middle of the labs.
Oh, interesting.
And so a patient comes in and everybody meets the patients. And so it gets organized around a problem, right? I don't want to work on something that's going to solve something 10, 20, 30 years out. People should. I believe in basic science, but I'm working on things where I can get an answer next year. We don't have a strategic plan for the next decade. We have a strategic plan for today. And it really goes around solving problems. And so patients come in, their cases, whether it be a cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, I want all the research there looking at how we make our decisions and then saying, how can I bring in a technology or some data way where we can actually make that done better?
So can anybody come to the Ellison Medical Institute?
Yeah. I mean, listen, patients come all the time. Obviously, there's more demand than supply, which is part of the reason we write books and we talk to people like you is to get word out there about things. Yeah. But our job is not just to treat disease, it's to change how we treat disease.
And what type of patients can you be most effective with?
We have a large clinic on preventive medicine and we have a cancer clinic. And so those are the two areas that we really put most of our energy to.
So I love hearing prevention. I'm a big fan of prevention. I think it's the best.
You're pro-prevention.
Yeah, yes. I guess that's the point of this podcast, actually. But, we spend something like 3% of our $5 trillion healthcare budget on prevention because we have a healthcare system that actually incents for sickness and then gets paid to mitigate. But you're saying that you help prevent disease. How do you do it in a clinic?
So it's interesting. Our healthcare system now, the problem is a lot of times is with prevention, if I do something today, it's going to help you in a decade or 2 decades.
Right.
And then there's nothing to course correct along the way, right? What you want is something where I can make an intervention, I can look at the data, make a corrector, if you will, and have you get a little bit straighter and then straighter and straighter and get to where I need to. And I really believe now with all the collection of data we're going to do with AI, we're going to be able to do that. And so what we do now is that we do studies, right? If you're a 60-year-old and you have an elevated cholesterol level, the first thing I want to do is I want to look inside your heart arteries and say, is there plaque there? If there's plaque there, I want to get very aggressive to stop it so it doesn't cause a problem. If there's not, I can be less aggressive in how I do things. Right? And by the way, if I show the patient, hey, there's plaque there, they're going to be compliant. They're going to, listen to what I say and they're going to understand why they're doing it. If I say this number is elevated, I don't really need to take it. And by the way, the day before you come in, you always take your medicine. And these cholesterol medicines, they work in a day. So you go, hey, listen, I only took it 20 of the last 30 days. And he said my numbers are great. Yeah. So next month I'll do 10 days. And you're always doing it the day before. So I'm always patting you on the back, not realizing that 20 days of the month, you're not doing it. And so when you realize what's going on with yourself, when you have that inner knowledge of what's happening, you do the right thing. And so, I wear these biometric devices and I'm able to look and say, hey, I got good sleep last night. What did I do during the day? Because I want to recapitulate that tomorrow so I can get a good night's sleep tomorrow. Or I didn't get a good night's sleep. Why? And so I have a feedback loop. And the key is to get that feedback loop.
It's it's a lot easier to convince a 60-year-old with plaque to do something than it is to convince a 20-year-old who's eating cheeseburgers and drinking Coke and Doritos and not getting very good sleep because they wake up the next day and they feel fine. I think the biggest problem with prevention is you have to do it for decades to work, and you have to remember to do it, or find the discipline, or find the presence of mind. Do any of the interventions you do, do you actually catch people when they're still healthy and have a protocol for them so they're not showing up in your office at 60 with plaque in their arteries?
So it's interesting. I don't believe in protocols. I believe in education. So in order to get normative behavior change, you need leadership. And one of the things sorely lacking in our field in health is leadership. If I ask you who the Surgeon General is, nobody really knows. They roll their eyes, right? And who are health leaders? Health and food are 25% of our economy, yet we have no leadership in those spaces. So one of the Silicon Valley companies had me come in and they say, hey, help us with the diet of our employees. So I did the brilliant, stupid thing, which is I had the burgers subsidized by the salad. There was revolt. Everybody was pissed off.
I love it.
Then a couple weeks later, I did something very simple. As I wrote next to each food, a little thing about the good and the bad. Because there's no perfect food and there's no horrible food. Everything has something, with a few exceptions.
You mean Skittles? Or?
Yeah. Skittles, Doritos, a little bit, but most things. And so just by educating people, not telling them what to do, they actually started to make the right decisions.
I love it.
And so we have to get away from the medicine about do this and do that, and just educating of the why.
I love the behavioral economics too, where you make this healthy salad cheaper and charge a little bit more for the burger.
Listen, there are countries out there that say, hey, listen, you're allowed to skip your colonoscopy, but if you have colon cancer, you pay a $68,000 surcharge before we'll treat you. You're welcome to smoke.
What country's that?
Singapore. You're welcome to smoke, but you pay a $70,000+ surcharge before we'll treat your lung cancer. You have to take ramifications for your behavior. In the United States, we say, do whatever you want, and then the healthcare system will pay for the ramifications of your behavior.
What, that's such a mistake.
That makes no sense, right? Why should the non-smokers be subsidizing the smokers? Why should the people who exercise be subsidizing the people who don't? We all need to take responsibility. In that respect, we can get a better outcome. Michael Dell had an amazing thing at Dell. We started to say, hey, listen, if you're overweight, I'm going to charge you 2.4 times your health insurance cost because that's what it costs us. If you smoke, 3x. And then there was a revolt at the company. People got pissed off. Then he changed it, and same economics, but he gave a discount to the non-smokers and a discount to the people who were not obese, and people didn't object. So it's very interesting, the carrot and the stick.
Yeah, use the carrot.
The day you went into the smoking cessation program, your health insurance premium changed.
I love that.
So to realize that we're all in charge of our own outcomes, and that society doesn't have an obligation for basically enabling us to do the wrong thing.
So a great answer. And for smoking and obesity, everybody will agree that smoking is bad for you and being too overweight is bad for you. But when it comes especially to diet, it gets a little bit gray. I recently spoke to Dr. Dean Ornish, who is a good friend of mine. And I asked him, what is the diet of longevity, the diet that will keep your heart healthiest? And he said, vegan and low oil. So you can't eat any animal products, no ultra-processed food. And then a few days later, I was talking to Dr. Agus, who wrote the South Beach Diet. And I said, what is the diet of heart health that'll keep me living the longest? And he said, grass-fed beef and eggs. Mm-hmm. And here are the two top doctor experts in the world, the people who are educating us, telling me polar opposite things. Yeah. What should we be doing when it comes to food if we want to live the longest?
See, this is the problem, right? Everybody's selling something, right? I'm selling my ideas. I believe in this, therefore, unless you do this, you've screwed up. And so the key is to look at the data, right? In almost every single clinical trial done, the Mediterranean diet, which you espouse, has one in everything, and it's moderation, right? Anything to an extreme doesn't make a lot of sense. You have to look at what we did during evolution, right? We ate real foods, so not processed foods, nothing in a blender, nothing with ingredients that stabilize the fat or can enable shelf life. We ate real, fresh food. We had good fats. We had our meal times regular, right? We would make a kill in the wild and then have the group as a family. So we all have family meals, and we had the leftover in the morning. We didn't have a kitchen cabinet where we ate food all day. So no grazing. Choose, I'm a 2 meal a day guy or a 2 meal a day girl and 3 meal a day. Stick to it with nothing in between. And every meal needs to have protein and fat as well as carbohydrates. And it's very simple like that. You can be a vegan and be remarkably healthy, but it's tough to get enough protein and fat. You have to be very smart. It's a lot easier to eat a Mediterranean diet, but they both will do it. And with both of them, you can achieve a healthy outcome. At the same time, right, evolution didn't select out for who lived till 110. It selected out for who had good children. So if you want to live till 90s, 100, you have to sometimes tweak. And that tweaking means looking at some blood factors. Is inflammation high? Is LDL, that bad cholesterol, high? Is that good cholesterol too low? And there are ways to change all of them to enable you to prevent disease.
So let's coarse grain diet by asking you what you eat. I mean, you're incredibly sharp and you look great. We know how old you are. What do you eat every day?
So I'm very simple, right? In the morning, I have, heart healthy eggs. I have, some hard cheese. I have some avocado, and that's what I have along with a cup or two of coffee every morning. Lunch, I have salad with some protein. And dinner, I kind of alternate, a cold water fish, chicken. I have grass-fed beef once a week. And I have a glass of wine a couple nights a week. I eat nothing in between meals. I try not to snack. I exercise every morning, alternating between, stretching, pattern recognition, things like tennis, weightlifting occasionally, but really try to do things where I push, stop, which is why tennis is really associated with longevity, because it's not pushing like you do on your 1,000-mile bike rides.
Oh, they were all downhill.
Oh.
But no, I'll have to say about your diet, there's not a lot of plants in there. You mentioned a salad, but not much fiber other than that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so at dinner, it's, again, when I say I have cold water fish, it's a small portion of fish and a very large portion of vegetables.
You better tell us what cold water fish is.
So, what's very interesting is that it's the oils that enable a fish to live in cold water that have a benefit for us as humans. And so people try to replicate it all the time and sell you a pill. Here's the fish oil. 1 4-ounce serving of salmon is equivalent to 9 to 11 fish oil capsules. And if you have a beautiful fish, you sell it to the fish, company Santa Monica Seafood in LA, or who's ever selling the fish. And if you have an ugly looking degraded fish, you give it to the fish oil company. So eat that real food. So yes, I have, along with that source of protein, I have, whatever is in season or flash frozen vegetables that night.
And the salmon, is it okay to be farmed or is it wild?
It's the oils that allow a fish to live in cold water. And so the problem with most farm salmon is it's done very near the shore where it's warmer waters and it's in confined areas. So there's much higher concentrations of nitrogen. So I try to restrict to wild salmon. Even if it's flash frozen, it's a lot better than something fresh that's farm raised.
You told me, but you talk a lot about inflammation. And I think it's something that people only vaguely understand. What is it and why is it so important to avoid inflammation? And then finally, I'm going to ask you how to avoid it.
So when you start to look, when you skin your elbow, it turns red and it hurts. That's inflammation, right? And that inflammation stays there until it's healed. Well, you can imagine inside your blood vessels, there's inflammation there, right? What happens when you get inflammation in your elbow? You get a scab. You get inflammation inside your blood vessels, it can lead to a scab too. And that scab can lead to a heart attack, a stroke, and other things. And what we also know is that any organ where there's inflammation, there's extreme cell turnover, and there's a dramatically higher rate of cancer. So people with inflammation of the colon, for example, much higher rates of colon cancer. You smoke and get inflammation in your lungs, you have a much higher rate of lung cancer. People who get burns and inflammation on their skin have higher rates of skin cancer. So what we know is organs with inflammation, a decade or so from now, will have much higher rates of cancer. So the key is to try to keep our inflammation in check. And so lots of sources of inflammation in our body, whether it be our blood vessels, individual organs, muscles, other things, you want to keep them in check.
So we get inflammation from infections, but we also get it from being stressed out. We also get it, by the way, from working out too hard.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize you go run 10 miles today, tomorrow when you feel achy, that's inflammation.
Yeah, and with inflammation, right, your body takes a lot of energy to repair. And, it's basically, you also, with all those cells turning over, every time that cell turns over, is a chance of a mutation and getting cancer or other things. And so you want your body to not have that inflammation and be able to put its energy to really good things and productivity, which we all do. So how do we keep inflammation down? Well, we watch our activities, right? You don't want to do sports and things that have tremendous inflammation, right? You get inflammation in the brain, concussions, football players have rather short life expectancy, one of the shortest of any profession, because they keep beating their body up and especially their brain. You want to certainly limit that. You want to make sure that you have a diet that doesn't promote inflammation. You want to make sure that there are inflammatory...
What diet promotes inflammation?
The easiest way to keep inflammation down is to fast in between meals, right? The hormones that promote inflammation are stress hormones.
You better say... You and I know what fast between meals mean, but what does it mean to somebody listening out there?
So it's kind of wild, right? Everyone says, well, listen, I fast in between meals. I only have healthy food in between meals. I only eat almonds or I only have an apple. But what happens is if you have that apple...
Between every meal, I fast an hour.
Yeah. If you have that apple, in between lunch and dinner today, tomorrow your body's insulin, cortisol goes up, which are the stress hormones. And they stay up basically until you eat dinner, where they'll come down again. And that really affects the body. So the key is that when you have your breakfast, you stop and you eat nothing, nada, till lunchtime. Or if you're a 2-meal-a-day person, until dinner time. Both of which are fine. You just got to be regular in saying, I'm a 2-meal-a-day person or a 3, and then stick to it. So nothing in between
What's
meals.
the optimal eating pattern in your opinion?
I honestly don't know. Nobody has done a randomized trial. All of the trials looking at intermittent fasting and things like that show no benefit to a standard diet where you're not eating in between meals. The key really is the no snacking. What we do know, for example, is that if ball players change one time zone, so shift their meal by an hour or two, it affects their performance, both athletically and also thinking, cognitive function.
Wow.
So really try to stick to the same time every day for your meals. Your body strives for regularity. We used to have it by the sun, right? We would eat our dinner every night, when the sun would set. And so there'd be slight changes, but it'd be very slight. Now we just do it whenever we want. Well, Jim's in town, I'm going to eat late. I got home early and eat early today. Try to stick to a regular schedule.
So this business about trying not to eat for 12 or 14 hours between your last meal of the day before and the first meal of today, that you're not a big believer in that?
Well, there's no real data that there's a benefit there. There's a real data. If you're going to do it and just, be regular with your meals, that's fine. But if you say, listen, I'm going to have 14 hours between my last meal and my first meal, and then I'm going to eat for that whole period in between, that makes no sense.
Okay.
The key really is that regularity. I don't care how long is in between as long as it's regular.
Great. I'm going to stay on inflammation here for a minute.
Yes.
So we have regularity of meals. How about physical activity? Because for years, the marathons and triathlons and pumping iron and CrossFit were the paragon of physical activity. What do you think is the optimal physical activity for, let's just say, a middle-aged healthy person in America?
So, our bodies were designed to move. Our lymphatics that control our immune system have no muscle in their walls. It's actually the rhythmic contraction of the muscles in your legs when you walk that make your body work. So movement during the day is critical, right? The Apple Watch, when it taps you on the wrist, once an hour saying, you haven't gotten up and moved, there's a reason for that. So the first is movement over time, critical for health. Then the second is you want to get your heart rate up, for 15, 20 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be dramatic, right? If you can get it up 50 to 60% higher from where you start at 70, get it to 110, 120, that's great. So
is that a brisk walk or is that a sprint?
It's different in everybody, right? I mean, if you're in amazing shape, it may take you a little bit of a sprint. If you're walking every day, don't walk a lot, maybe that walk can do it. And then you don't want to push too much. There's kind of diminishing return after an hour. So what happens in
that's
marathon
a big
runners?
point. Diminishing returns after an hour.
Marathon runners have, relatively short lives comparatively. They push, push, push. You get compensatory enlargement of the heart. And many times you can get aberrant electrical signaling, cardiac arrhythmias and other things. We all remember Jim Fixx, right, who wrote the book on running and was the paragon of, running health, who died of a heart attack at a relatively young age while promoting his New York Times bestselling book on running. And so the key really is, what grandma said, moderation and everything. And so we're all different, what gives us joy. But the key also is to do things that make us uncomfortable, right? Everybody says, well, I do this every day. I want you to, listen, I do yoga. No offense, I hate yoga, but I do it because it makes me uncomfortable and I'm not good at it and it works, right? To do things that are difficult and make you uncomfortable is really important on things. If you do something you're really good at all the time and nothing that really challenges you, it's probably not the best. The human brain evolved. Say he or she who can make their way in the wild and do hunting and gathering and make their way back survived. So physical activity and pattern recognition are really critical. That's why running outdoors is so much better than running on a treadmill.
I'm going to challenge you on the uncomfortable piece. And it's probably just semantics, but if you look at Americans, only 25% of them get even 20 minutes of physical activity. That means 3 out of 4 Americans don't even get 20 minutes. Why is that? I think because they don't enjoy it. And it's my philosophy when it comes to physical activity to do something every day that you enjoy. Mm-hmm. And maybe, building muscle mass a la Peter Attia is better for you. Or maybe, this sprint is better for you. But I'd rather have 75% of Americans getting over 20 minutes of physical activity, doing something they love, than this.
I don't disagree, but remember, enjoyment and being comfortable aren't necessarily the same thing.
That's
so
semantics thing. I
knew what I don't want you to do is to do something by rote, right? Just to do something by rote, where your brain is turned off and you're just standing at the wall, going on a treadmill like this.
Yeah.
I want you to be a little bit more uncomfortable, to do things that challenge yourself, right? When you challenge yourself, you get enjoyment from it. I see it in your face and you hear from you on this bike ride, on climbing this. That gave you enjoyment.
Oh, yeah.
That made you uncomfortable while you were doing it, but you felt great afterwards. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
And what you call course grain it. What's your daily physical activity routine?
So I stretch almost every day. So I try to do at least 6 days a week of stretching. I try to do 2 to 3 days a week of aerobics. And because of my schedule, I do, 2 of them in the house because I don't have time to get out many times during the weekday. So I've got a treadmill, a rowing machine, and I have weights in the house where I could do those. And on weekends, I try to play tennis and be outdoors. So I try to do something every day. And, I hurt my back last year. So for a couple of months, I couldn't do anything. And I will tell you, I got depressed. My brain didn't work well. I didn't feel the same. And it really had an enormous impact on me. And I didn't even realize how exercise was helping me for the day. I'm one of those people with these biometrics. I know if I exercise in the morning, I have a great day. If I do in the evening, I don't sleep well. Everybody's different. We're all unique. And so I know I have to do it in the morning. So I get up early. I go to the gym. I turn on CNBC. I watch what's going on in the world, and I can do my programs.
Yeah, that brings up a point about data and individual. When it comes to population, we can give very accurate advice. We can say, get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a day, move every single day, and we can say, eat largely whole foods, unprocessed. But when it comes to individuals, it's a lot harder, isn't it?
I was shocked. I wore one of those continuous glucose monitors.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody exactly what you just said, but I didn't realize, for example, what raised my sugar in my blood. So it's a little patch you put on your arm. Very soon it's going to be on the watches. So you don't even need it. There's a tiny needle that goes in these patches now, but pretty soon it'll just measure it through the skin. And I was started to see when I did this, my sugar went up. When I exercised, it went down. This food made it go up. This food didn't. When I had protein followed by carbs, my sugar was flat. When I had carbs alone, it went up. And it was an amazing feedback loop for me. We're all going to be so much better when we get these feedback loops. That's what excites me about technology now. It's starting to give us these feedback loops, right? And it's starting to say, hey, you hit your goal today for exercise. You got to sleep a score of 70 today. What did you do differently than yesterday where it was 85? And you have these feedback loops, instantaneous, rather than waiting decades.
So for people who don't have a lot of money, what are the electronics they might want to everybody might want to think about investing in and keeping track of?
Well, listen, I don't even keep track of our health. I don't even think you need the electronics. I mean, electronics are for the geeky people who like bright, shiny things. Many times it's just keeping a diary, right? I mean, you know, in all of our phones now, we have the ability of keeping a diary of how we feel. How we feel is probably the most important thing. You know, when it tells me I have a readiness score of 90, I feel good. If it tells me a readiness score of 60, I know I don't feel well. And so how you feel is everything. You know, you look back in history, the greatest doctors, right? Maimonides, you know, who's one of the most more remarkable ones. You know, the amazing Greek doctors. What they would do is they would publish, you know, he had a book of basically every food and how it affected his athletic and his sexual performance. An entire book. When I ate milk products, sexual performance was down. If I eat too much protein, my athletic performance is down because he listened to himself. We've now shut off this thing of how do you feel after you do something. There's certain foods, you're not going to feel good afterwards. Well, you probably shouldn't be eating them. There are others where you feel fine afterwards and you don't feel bloated and full. Those are probably better for you in the long run. The human body is amazing like that.
If you were to buy one gadget that you could afford, what would it be for your health that would improve your health?
You know, for me, I do the Ring because it measures my sleep. It takes about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to charge a week. So the problem with the watch is, you know, you have to charge it every day. So you got to choose. I'm going to wear it at night or I'm going to wear it during the day.
Ring, right?
So this is an Oura Ring, but I'm not advocating for one particular product.
Yeah.
The Fitbit is great. The Apple Watch, they're all great. And we're all a little bit different. But the Ring is good for me just because I always forget to charge things. Now I could charge it when I'm in the shower once a week. And at night, it doesn't bother me when I sleep. And to me, knowing my sleep is important.
And what have you, is there an example of the Ring told you something about your sleep and you've been able to change it?
I realized that I was having dinner most nights, you know, kind of like at 7 or 8 o'clock. I would get home, I'd answer my emails, I'd play with the kids or talk to my wife, and then I would have dinner. And then I kind of realized that when I shifted dinner an hour and a half earlier, I got about 8, 9 points on my sleep improvement. So eating dinner earlier mattered for me. And then the big one for me also was when I watch blue light, right? I always looked at my iPhone, check on my patients. I always say, well, I have patients, I have to look at my iPhone. Or when I would watch TV, I wouldn't get as much deep sleep. When I now wear the blue light blocking glasses, I get about 15% more deep sleep.
Wow, that's
every
a big
night.
Deal.
And same thing on my kids. It radically affected them. They don't need glasses. They wear plain ones with the blue light blocking and they get better deep sleep.
That's a takeaway I'm going to do because I look at screens too and I get crappy deep sleep.
But I've got ones next to my TV. I've got it next to where I read at night and it makes a big impact blocking that blue light. You know, when your brain sees blue light, it says, you know, hey, listen, you know, it's daytime, so you could be attacked by something. So don't get deep sleep. It's not safe. So it's a safety mechanism. And so you may get sleep, but it's not going to be deep sleep. Everyone says to me, well, I could drink caffeine at night. I can watch TV and I could sleep fine. But I guarantee you, if you restricted the caffeine to before 10 a.m. and you wear the blue light glasses, you're going to get more deep sleep, which is what's needed for your brain.
Before 10 a.m. Wow, that's early.
10, 11 a.m., yeah. Well, it's got a half-life in the blood of about 8 hours.
Yeah.
So half of it is gone 8 hours later.
So at midnight, you probably still have a quarter of the caffeine.
There's
you still got your first
there,
cup of coffee in your...
Yeah.
You know, I don't get involved with many companies, but about a year and a half ago, I was introduced to Get Joy dog food. And you say to yourself, why is Dan Buettner getting involved with dog food? Well, it turns out that people who own dogs live longer. They have a lower chance of cardiovascular disease. They have lower rates of obesity, and they have lower cortisol levels, which means lower inflammation. We think a lot about ourselves, but what about those wonderful creatures that help us live longer? Shouldn't we be helping them live longer? And what I love about Get Joy is they have an entire program that helps your dog live longer. And it's not just the food, it goes into the environment they live in and how you actually set your dog's life up so they'll maximize their happiness and health. It all starts, however, with their food. And they have the best dog food on the planet. Their freeze-dried raw dog food is made with real whole food ingredients like 100% USDA sourced beef or chicken and pumpkin for digestion. I love that. Do you know that pumpkin seeds has more protein than beef? Very few people knew that. This is raw nutrition, freeze-dried to lock in 97% of the nutrients without any high heat or pressure processing. You'll never find fillers, artificial flavors, or seed oils in Get Joy products. Just clean, honest nutrition developed by a PhD vet and nutritionist and third-party testing for quality and safety. What really sets it apart? The Belly Biotic Blend. I love that. Belly Biotic Blend, a powerful combo of pre, pro, and postbiotics that supports your dog's gut health. You never think of your dog's gut, really, but they have bacteria in there too. Gut health is the foundation of overall wellness, and that's what Get Joy is all about. After just a month, pet parents report better digestion, more energy, and shinier coats. But most importantly, healthier, happier dogs. Because joy starts from within. Save 30% on your first order, plus receive a free scoop and a free bag of treats, $33 value. Visit getjoyfood.com/DanB. You won't regret it. Let's move from what we can do now to what's just over the horizon. You said 2 or 3 years you expect. What are the first interventions that are actually going to improve the fundamental workings of aging, this kind of sort of doubling of damage we get, not just keeping us from getting diseases, but actually increasing the capacity of the human machine?
So, I think there are 2 parts to it, right? One you alluded to, which is blocking disease, right? If we can block disease, we're all going to live better and have a longer health span. But at the same time, we have to work on our engineering aspects.
Yeah, that's
our artery health, that's our muscle health, and that's our bone health. Those are the 3 kind of buckets. And then you couple with that brain health, right? We've all seen people who have cognitive decline as they get older, and they certainly cannot enjoy life like people whose brain is working in their 90s. So the first is on the cognitive side, it's that deep sleep, right? Tremendously important. We all know we need that, and we have to get better at doing that. There is a class of drugs now, really the first class of drugs that enable you to go to sleep. When I travel, I take a sleeping pill. I know it's bad, but I take a sleeping pill my first night or 2. Well, the first class of drugs, it actually hits your sleep center, not your wake center. Most sleeping pills hit your wake center. And the problem is at night, hit your sleep center. It's not that you're not tired, right? It's that your wake center keeps going. So if you hit your sleep center, you just get more tired. There's a hangover effect the next day, and it affects your cognitive function. Well, we now have the ability of turning off the wake center. And in a clinical trial of people over 70, it improved cognitive function the next day.
Wow.
So the notion of these
drugs— You mean
drugs—
it affects their sleep, not their wake?
Well, it hits their wake center, enabling them to fall asleep.
Okay.
So it doesn't make them more tired. It just blocks that wake center that keeps going. When I travel to London, right, at night, my wake center keeps going because it thinks it's daytime for me. And so when you block that wake center, you can get that deep sleep you need to get cognitive function the next day. And that's tremendously important rather than making us more tired and affecting negatively our cognitive function. So these orexin antagonists, they're called, are out there now, and they're a safer form of a pill to be able to do that. And I think you're going to see other things that enable us basically to get better rhythms in our brain, which is critical. Our arteries, right? We now can do that, right? We have the technology. It involves radiation now, so it's a CAT scan. Hopefully, very soon, it won't involve radiation, but we can look inside the heart arteries and know what's going on. To say, hey, every 5 years, there's something there. I want to intervene before it causes damage and a problem. Right now, imaging, right, is transactional. You want an MRI, it's an hour. This is a $10 million machine, an hour scan. So it's not scalable. We only do it when people are very ill. CAT scanners, while it's quicker, involves radiation. Cumulative radiation can increase cancer and other risks. But pretty soon, we're going to be able to do very quick scanning with MRI-like machines where we can upscale the image. Do you ever go on your iPhone and you go like this to make the image bigger?
Yeah.
It's not changing a lens,
Yeah.
right? It's upscaling that. And so that's all done with software. So you can imagine taking a very low resolution, 5-minute MRI that does your whole body, and we can upscale it so it's got a resolution of the most fancy, complex MRI that would have taken hours. You want to do a high-resolution MRI of your whole body, that's about a 4-hour test. The beauty is, in the future, we can upscale these low-resolution ones, so in 5 minutes, you can have everything and know what's going on. And so we can start to intervene early. And I think that's going to be critical.
So, David Sinclair had this theory that all of our cells have kind of a backup program.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking earlier on that our cells build up damage. They, on average, they reproduce themselves every 7 years or so. Every time they reproduce themselves, you have 2x more damage. So in 7 years, it's X. In 14 years, it's 2X. And it's 4. Then it's 16, et cetera. Is there anything over the horizon, any drug or genetic intervention that you're starting to see at your institute or elsewhere that suggests we'll be able to stop that fundamental damage, which is really the technical cause of aging?
I don't think we're going to reverse what's going on in cells, but I do think we're going to enable generation of new cells, right? If I knock you off a bicycle and skin your elbow, your platelets come in and they cause clotting. And they also turn on stem cells. So you get new regeneration in skin cells. And then a month later, it's healed over. 3 months later, you don't even see the wound, right? Because stem cells get turned on there. So you can imagine every organ has those stem cells that are sitting there asleep, normally in our mid-20s. And if we can turn them back on to regenerate functional good cells, we're going to be able to be much more functional in our bones, in our muscles, in our heart, in our brain. And I do think that's something that will happen over the next several years, is we're going in an organ-specific way be able to enable stem cells. Most of what's out there now with stem cells is total bullshit. 99.9% of that is
I just want to make a point. Most of what's out there with stem cells is total bullshit.
It's 100%. As you go anywhere you have to go to a mall or go to a foreign country for it, there's something wrong there. Yes, most of what's going on.
Why is it bullshit? You hear all kinds of people say, "Yeah, my knee wouldn't work, and I got stem cells. It was amazing." Or my shoulder. Some people do system-wide stem cells.
Right. It's right now we don't have the ability. Shinya Yamanaka won the Nobel Prize for what's called Yamanaka factors, where he could take fat cells and make them go into stem cells. And now the first real clinical trials are trying to use them first in the eye, and then they'll use them in other organs. But it's still early days. Most of what's out there aren't real stem cells. They don't know what they're doing, and they can cause real problems and danger. And that's one of the things, taking whether it be a vitamin, a supplement, a stem cell, many of them, it's not that they're benign. Well, it's not going to cause any harm. I might as well do it just in case. Many of them cause harm, right? Men who take vitamin E, in one of the largest studies done, have dramatically higher rates of prostate cancer. Smokers and former smokers who take vitamin A and beta-carotene, dramatically higher rates of lung cancer and death. And by the way, death is a bad endpoint for a vitamin and a supplement.
Great for marketing.
Many of the supplements out there have heavy metals and other things in them, and they're not pure. So you start to look at them, there really is the potential of causing harm. So it's sticking to that real food. It's don't doing these things now that don't have data behind them. Because again, I want you healthy for 3-4 years from now when these big breakthroughs are going to happen so you can get them.
Do you take any supplements?
Damn, no.
No, I don't either. I don't believe in it.
No, I take a baby aspirin a day and I take a statin. Those are the two things I take.
And statins are so you don't build up cholesterol.
Yeah, statins are, so, they lower LDL, but the real mechanism, there's something called the Jupiter study where they take people with normal cholesterol and they gave them one of the statins and it dramatically delayed heart disease. And in this study also reduced cancer because it blocked inflammation. And aspirin, which will reduce the overall death rate of cancer by 30%, heart disease by 22%, and stroke by 17%, also reduces inflammation. So you look at those two, reducing inflammation equals preventing disease.
So should every 30-year-olds start taking an aspirin and a statin?
It all depends on what your family history. Right now, most of the studies were done in people over the age of 40 or over the age of 50, but it really depends on individual risk factors and is talking to your doctor about it. If everybody in your family died in their 50s of heart disease, or there was significant heart disease in the families and elevated cholesterol, you probably want to be on a statin at a very early age. If people had cancer and colon cancer, you may want to be on an aspirin at an early age.
Which, by the way, is almost everybody, cancer or cardiovascular disease. But what's the one thing you know about health that you wish every 25-year-old understood?
What you do today matters tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I think, most 25, 30, 40-year-olds think they're immune. And once they get, there's an amazing study came out saying the biggest changes in health happen in the 40 years old and around 60 years old. And so when something happens and you realize that you've got potential vulnerability, you start to do things. Many times it could be too late. So I want to start to encourage healthy behavior earlier and have people understand that what they do today will matter tomorrow. And it's very hard to do that.
Yeah, especially when it tastes good. This pizza tastes good.
Yeah, and listen, pizza in moderation is fine. I'm not saying don't eat pizza. Don't eat pizza every day and make sure the ingredients are good.
The problem with moderation is very few people know exactly what it means. It's, I only ate a pizza today for crying out loud. And it was only one a day. So on this podcast, we give extra points for vulnerability. So I'm going to ask you, you're a doctor. What is the piece of health advice that you break for yourself all the time, or that you struggle with, that you tell others?
Well, listen, I will tell you that in December of this year, I had my first real health crisis, is that I had a disc that slipped and I woke up and I couldn't move my left leg or feel it. And, I ended up having what we call a microdiscectomy, where they can go in with a little scope and clip off part of the disc to enable there not to be pressure on that nerve and your leg to function again. And when I look back, what did I do wrong? I probably didn't focus on my core like I should have for exercise, right? Working on the core doesn't feel fun, right? I like playing tennis. I like doing things that, were more aggressive and made me feel fun, but not focusing on my core. So that really, really hurt me. And that was a big issue. And now I'm doing all that boring core exercise where, really building up this part where I'm pointing to kind of below my neck and, above my waist, really focusing on that because I know it's going to help me a lot as I go into my next couple of decades.
Great answer. I'm going to ask you just a few sort of common healthy tips and ask you to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. And we can just kind of do them.
1 is the worst, 10
1
is good.
1 is the worst, 10 is the best.
Right.
Okay. Smoothies.
2 or 3.
2 or 3.
Through evolution, right, we weren't made to absorb everything at once and to have things into a blender. So when you put something in a smoothie, it gets absorbed right away. Insulin peaks through the roof. Right? There's a great example. James Lind was captain of the British Royal Navy, and he fought the French in the Battle of Trafalgar. And back then, the British soldiers, he put limes on their ship. That's why British soldiers were called limeys. His soldiers didn't get scurvy. The French did get scurvy because they had no fresh fruits or vegetables on their ships. And then at the end of the war, he said, I'm selling the extract of lime to make money because he wanted to sell the extract. And once you squeeze a lime, all the vitamin C degrades like that.
Wow.
And it didn't work, and they called him a fraud. You put something in blender, everything degrades right away, and it gets absorbed into its parts, not the whole, and that's not what you want. You want to chew and activate these enzymes, swallow and have some absorbed here, some absorbed here, some absorbed here. Very different than putting something for convenience sake into a blender.
That is such a huge insight because I think most people think I start my day with a smoothie or even a vegetable smoothie, and they think it's good for them. Same with juicer. There was that whole juicing craze. Yep. Why juice? And
but people can
detox.
Make a buck on it, right? They sell the machines. Juices cost, buy a juice is $10. To buy an orange costs 50 cents. You're not going to make bucks. A lot of bucks selling oranges. You will selling juices.
Note to self. All right, a glass of red wine a day, scale 1 to 10.
Probably 8 or 9.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing, right? The National Academy of Medicine, one of our most august bodies, published a report in December saying that net alcohol in moderation has a health benefit rather than a detriment. some benefit on heart disease, minimal increase in breast cancer, particularly in women. The Surgeon General, several months later, literally a couple of weeks before he stepped out of office, said, hey, alcohol, we have to put a warning label on. And so if you really look at it, do you drink coffee?
Yes.
Do you ever have a piece of toast?
Yes.
You put them in a toaster, right? Or the coffee bean, and you roast them. That brown is sugars joining together, forming something called acrylamide. Acrylamide has more carcinogenic potential than red dye number 3 by almost an order of magnitude, has more carcinogenic potential than alcohol, yet we don't outlaw them. And so you have to really look at the whole, and you need to set real criteria. So certainly, a glass of wine, we've been doing it for thousands of years, right? Going back to,
years.
Cultures. It's a 6,000, really?
Yes.
That's wild. If we've been doing it for 6,000 years, I guarantee you it's okay for us.
Probably not so bad.
Yeah.
How about protein powders and protein supplements?
Again,
Scale 1 to 10.
I'm not a fan of them. I'd probably give them a 4. Everybody wants a shortcut, right? I need lots of protein, so let me put it into a powder. Again, your body was made to, have protein, particular animal protein or plant protein, degrade it and absorb what you need. Once you put it into a powder, it's very different and goes into the bloodstream very quickly and can change things like blood pressure. You can have modulation and changes there. And you also don't absorb in the way your body was meant to. What you need, you get it all mainstreamed, if you will. So the key really is, and I think all of the studies have showed that it doesn't help much on muscle mass at all and can have some bad health ramifications. Eat real food.
How about a cup of beans a day? Scale 1 to 10.
9. It's great.
I love it.
Yeah.
How about running a marathon?
Running a marathon once, probably a 6 or 7. I like it because it gets you into a mindset. It trains you. It means you're lean body mass. Running a marathon, a couple times a year, probably a 2 or 3.
Yoga.
Probably a 9 or 10.
Wow. Pilates.
Probably a 9 or 10.
We're getting a theme here.
Yeah.
I want to kind of sort of close with it. I'd like to talk a little bit about this little health thing I went through with it. You were so kind to help me with. I was in Madrid and I had a lung infection and I kept bicycling and traveling through it, and it somehow spread to my heart, and I had a vasospasm, which cut off the blood to my heart. I ended up in the hospital for 4 days. And I came out and I called you, and you were very kind. And what was your assessment of what happened to me? I don't know if you remember those conversations.
First of all, I appreciate you talking about it. When all of us show our vulnerabilities, anybody, it helps others realize that this is not something you have to hide and that we have to focus on areas to prevent things. So when we first spoke, a mutual friend set us up. You and I have known each other for a long time, just been on the speaking circuit together.
Yeah.
And we've seen
Jerry
each
Murdoch
other.
wouldn't mind us dropping his name, but
No. Jerry Murdoch, one of the great wine collectors of the world,
yes.
speaking of wine.
Keeping our hearts healthy.
Put us together. And he really did it out of caring for you.
Yeah.
The first thing was, I wanted to make sure that the acute care, which means the care in that moment, was correct. Many times medical care is transactional, particularly if you're in a foreign country, right? They want to just get you out to go back to the hotel or go back to your home rather than making sure you're going to be okay a week, 2 weeks from now, et cetera, because you had to fly several thousand miles back home. So we had to make sure that you were stable and everything was done right so you could travel home safely. And so that was our first major conversation. Then the second one was when you got back to the States, trying to say, hey, why did this happen? How do we prevent this from happening again? Long term, right? Nothing is, in the short term a problem. You're remarkably healthy from your lifestyle, but at the same time, with that crazy healthy lifestyle, you're not immune to things. And I think that's one of the biggest messages is, right? The healthiest people in the world will still die of disease.
I had, so you looked at my cholesterol numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They were great. By the common assessment, I had low regular blood pressure. Mm-hmm. I get physical activity every single day. I eat a whole food plant-based diet. I have tons of friends. I have a great sense of purpose. I don't take supplements. I drink a glass of wine a day. I do everything you're supposed to do, but somehow I end up with a heart event. And what message does that give to people who are saying, well, why should I work out why should I do any of this stuff if Dan Buettner or Mr. Blue Zones gets sick?
It's very interesting because all of this is what we call probabilistic, right? If you have a great cholesterol and your numbers were great, then probabilistically you're lower risk for heart disease, but it's not zero. And so I think what we have to realize is that we are all vulnerable. And if we can improve our numbers, there's a benefit to that. And so all of us, even the Dan Buettners of the world, he can get better on things. And so looking at what is my family history, and then doing and saying, hey, listen, even though I have all of the good things, maybe I should get a test and see what's inside and to see what's there. If everything is clean, I'm great for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. If it's not, I can intervene. So probabilistic assessments are very, very difficult. If I say your LDL is 65, you go, that's a great number, but that still doesn't mean you're immune from heart disease.
That's good cholesterol.
That's the bad cholesterol. It's 65. Cholesterol. If that's low, that's good, but it means you're lower likelihood, but you're not zero. If your HDL, that good one, is high, that means, again, you're lower likelihood, but it doesn't mean that number is zero. And so I think we all have to realize that we have some vulnerability. Probabilistically, it tells us when to test on things and when to look, but it doesn't mean you're immune.
So what should I have done differently that might have precluded this event?
Do you have a family? Did anybody have heart disease in your family?
My grandfather had heart disease.
Yeah. And so having somebody in your family with a heart disease, we probably would have looked and done a study to say, hey, is there something going on in your blood vessels? And then is your LDL low enough to prevent it in you? And looking at those numbers. So while your LDL was low, it wasn't tremendously low. And so the way I look at statins is very simple. And I know people get pissed at me and I get hate mail because of it. If I put you on a statin, which will lower your risk of heart disease, even with a normal cholesterol, and lower your risk of cancer, and you don't know you're on it, I've done a good thing. If you have side effects, then it's probably not a good thing. So there's a risk reward here. Very small percentage of people have side effects, which is muscle aches. You stop it, they go away in a day. So if I could put you on a preventive medicine that will lower risk of things, even if you start off on the lower side, I've done a good thing.
Well, you did a good thing for me, and I have enduring thanks. And I might not have been here, by the way. You advised me to stay in Madrid, which I did for 5 days. It turns out, in my situation, flying could have been fatal. And so I guess I kind of owe you my life.
It was interesting because, I was a bit of a pain in the ass. You're like, no, but I have to be at this. I have to be at this. And I'm there trying to be tough and really explain the data to you. And listen, you're one of the smartest people on earth. And it still took you a while, to understand that. So you can imagine somebody who doesn't even want to hear it. You had an open mind at least and would listen. But this is why we have many issues in medicine. It's very hard to explain things to people.
And when you explain it to them, it's still hard to take that advice if it goes counter to what they want to do.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about that we haven't touched on?
No, listen, I love, and I have to say this, I've always loved what you do, which is, pattern recognition on the globe, right? You're going out there and saying, where's a pattern of, on a health basis, things that are better, and why does that pattern happen? And I think it's pretty amazing. Listen, I try to do it on the cancer side. You're doing it on the global side with overall health, and we can all learn from that, and I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you, David. David, I think you're one of the best doctors in the world, and I thank you, and thank you for this hour, and thank you for helping everybody listening live longer.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, and because not everybody gets this, by the way, what I'm about to give you here is only for the people who open up and are vulnerable. So thank you for telling us about your disc.
Thank you.